Alright everybody, so this week's video is basically going to cover the topic that I've been trying to get, sort of through this whole time, which is just the basics of how to design a lifting program for yourself. So I've covered a lot of the foundational stuff in the last couple of videos, and I've had a very hard time filming this video, in part because I've tried it a couple times already and it was sort of a disorganized mess, honestly. But I think that this time I'm going to get through it a little bit cleaner, a little bit more easily. So I'm going to jump right into it. The first thing that I'm going to cover today is basically the relationship between volume and intensity in a workout. So when you look at a graph like this, basically, what is volume, what is intensity? The first thing is intensity. Intensity is basically defined as the weight that you're using. And we could be saying, total, basically absolute intensity, which is, say, 100 pounds. So 100 pounds would be the absolute intensity. But when we talk about intensity when it comes to lifting weights, usually we're talking about percentages of what we call your 1 rep max, which is basically the heaviest weight that you could use for a single rep. So if you're doing a deadlift and, you're, decently strong, and basically you decide that you're going to see what your 1 rep max is, so you're going to start off at, maybe 100 pounds, 135, you're going to do 1 rep, you're going to add some weight, you're going to do 1 rep, add some weight. You repeat this process until you can't do a rep anymore. And let's say that you hit 315 as your 1 rep max. So at that point, how we define intensity is basically as a percentage of that 1 rep max. So if we wanted to do something that's, say, 50% intensity, then that would be about 157.5 pounds, because that is 50% of the 315, which is your 1 rep max. The other term here to understand is volume. Basically, when we talk about volume, what we're talking about is basically the total amount of training that you're doing. There's a lot of different ways to sort of understand it, and I'll discuss that in a minute. But basically, more volume equals more training is the idea, no matter how you measure it. Now, this graph here is basically, a pretty simple one. The idea here is just to demonstrate how volume and intensity are negatively correlated, which means that as your intensity increases, your volume is going to decrease, and vice versa. As you're decreasing your intensity, your volume is going to increase. So in a general sense, this makes sense, right? When you have a very light weight, you can do a lot of reps with it. You can probably recover a little bit quicker between sets, and you can, hit more total sets overall. So you can do a greater number of total reps with a lighter weight. And then when you get something that's higher in intensity, closer to that 1 rep max, let's say, with that 315 pound deadlift, let's say you're going to try 295. You could do 295 for maybe 2 reps, maybe 3 if you're, quite lucky. But basically, it's still not that many reps overall because it's a pretty heavy weight. So when we are talking about sort of the relationship between volume and intensity, the way that most people sort of scale their training is based on intensity as a percentage of your 1 rep max. And this is a really easy way to decide what your training volume or what your training intensity should be, your absolute intensity, because it scales really well with your actual strength levels. So, 50% of your 1 rep maximum is going to be pretty easy for pretty much anybody. It's not just going to be easy if you're super strong or if you're, not so strong. It scales up as you get stronger, and it works pretty well for basically everybody. So the next question that sort of raises is, okay, what is sort of the best way to train? What intensity do I want to train in? What volume do I want to train with? And so on. So that gets into sort of the next topic, which is basically, that there are sort of different advantages that you're going to get from training within those different rep ranges. So when you're talking about a very, high intensity, low volume rep range, maybe you can do, between, again, about 1 and 6 reps as in this graphic. And, that's basically going to be good for training strength because, of course, you're just training with very heavy weights. You're not training with a ton of endurance because you're not training with very many reps. You're, probably doing more than, just a couple sets or so to, continue to train with those heavy weights. But basically, the emphasis here is on training for building more strength. And this is also going to emphasize a lot of what we would call mechanical tension. So basically, this is just, the weight is heavy, you're feeling that on your body. Like, there's a lot of weight, it's difficult on your joints, it's difficult on your muscles, it's difficult on your tendons. So basically, that is going to be, sort of on the tension end of the equation. Now, on the opposite end of the equation, on the endurance spectrum, basically anything that's super high reps, it's going to be pretty light, and it's not going to tax your muscles in the same way because it's not going to be high in tension, it's not going to be high intensity. Instead, what you're going to feel on the endurance spectrum is you're going to feel more of a burn, you're going to feel more of a metabolic effect to it, basically because the primary stressor there is not the amount of weight that you are holding on the bar. It is the fact that you have to do this for a lot of repetitions. That's going to require a lot of energy, and your body is struggling to produce all that energy, to get in enough oxygen, to do enough metabolism, to get enough energy to your muscles so that they can keep doing this exercise. That doesn't mean that you're burning more energy overall, because essentially, in the strength side, you can burn a lot of energy very, very quickly, and that's how you're going to get super winded doing, maybe just a couple very hard reps. But endurance, it's a longer, slower burn. So that's not to say that, one or the other is necessarily going to burn more energy or sort of be better for you in terms of burning calories. But you are going to get basically more of that sort of adaptations designed to improve your strength if you train with that strength end, and you're going to get more of those adaptations in your body designed to improve your endurance if you're going to train on that endurance end. Now, right in the middle here, basically, about 8 to 12 reps, this is what we call sort of, the best for, hypertrophy, which is size, best for building muscle. So this is kind of a mix of the two. You're not going to be all the way on that side that's just tension, intensity, low reps, but you're also not going to be all the way on that side that is basically just all endurance, high metabolism, no tension. So you're getting something that's sort of a mix of the two, right? And that's the one that tends to sort of emphasize what we call the pump, which is that feeling where you've got a lot of blood and metabolites rushing into your muscles. It feels really good. Your muscles feel big and swollen. And that is, basically the sort of rep range that everyone trains in when they're looking to train for size. Now, the problem with this sort of general logic of this strength endurance continuum here is that while it holds up in the general sense, like all the things I've said to you are roughly true, it's important to understand that this is a spectrum, right? It's not just going to be, I'm doing 7 reps. 7 reps is nowhere on this little infographic right here, so immediately I'm somehow not getting strength or size. It's not something where it's like, I'm doing 6 reps, immediately it's all strength and no size. The reality is that you can actually build muscle pretty well in basically any of these rep ranges. And this has been validated by studies repeatedly. And so, that raises sort of the question, so why do we think that this middle range here is going to be the best for size? And this is a topic that basically Greg Nuckols covers a lot in Stronger by Science. I highly recommend you check this article out, Hypertrophy Rep Range, Fact or Fiction. Basically, it breaks down a lot of the sort of, mistakes that a lot of people make in interpreting that sort of graphic that I just showed you. Basically, what they found is that there's not a huge difference in muscle growth when comparing different rep ranges. And sort of something that Greg points out himself in his own analysis of, the science is basically that doesn't mean that it's not generally still going to work best for most people. And that's simply because most people don't want to go on the super high tension end or on the super high metabolism end, because those are both going to present their own challenges that are going to basically make it a little bit more difficult in the end if you're looking to build size. So the reality is that even while it's kind of a myth that you need to stay in the hypertrophy range to build size, and you can in fact build size in a lot of different rep ranges, the reality is that, it is what it is. Like, you can build muscle anywhere. Most people are probably still going to enjoy the hypertrophy rep range, sort of the 8 to 12 or so, that we've, already discussed. But one thing that I would like to add is that also recommends to me that you should be training in a bunch of different rep ranges, because that way you can sort of get the best of all worlds in terms of getting a little bit of strength, getting a little bit of size, getting a little bit of endurance, all at the same time. And you can actually, there's basically, that's what we call daily undulating periodization, which is just a fancy way of saying that you train at different rep ranges throughout the week. And that is an approach that tends to be a little bit better on average for a lot of people, simply because, you have this benefit of getting the benefits of each of those rep ranges with, different rep ranges provoking different adaptations. And you're not just doing the same thing over and over again, which is boring, which is, going to make you kind of a one-trick lifter, right? So, to talk about sort of, okay, I'm designing a program for myself, what do I do? Well, as discussed earlier, you're going to want to find movements that are going to be specific to the goals that you're looking to accomplish. You're going to want to find, movements that you like that don't bother any injuries or issues that you have. You can use special ways of varying it up. You want to take decently long rest periods, typically, although there may be some cases where you want to artificially limit your rest periods. And then you want to pick basically sort of what rep ranges that you want to focus on. So typically, when you're talking about your big compound movements that I've discussed in previous episodes, you want to focus a little bit more on, sort of really caring about those rep ranges. You want to do things like, okay, if I really want to build strength, I'm going to want to make sure that I'm doing my bench press in that strength, rep range. If I'm looking to build size, that's where I'm going to want to put my bench press. And yes, you'll want to maybe train your bench press a couple different times a week. So, okay, you say one day I'm going to train strength, the other day I'm going to train a little bit more of a size-focused rep range. Again, that way you're kind of getting the best of both. And, again, you're just sort of making sure that you're not just going to be a one-trick pony. So, once you've sort of got all of that in mind, the question becomes, okay, what are the sets, the reps, what are the exact numbers, right? And that is what most people are looking for when they are asking, okay, how do I design a program? And this is the thing that I think that we have been misled about. This is the thing that I think that most people fundamentally don't understand in a lot of ways, because when you see programs on the internet, that's what you see, right? You see those sets, you see those reps, you see those numbers, you see that intensity, and people assume that what's happening is that there is some magic, there's some way that those numbers are magically being put together to create some mystical special effect. And the reality is not that. The reality is that what matters most at the end of the day, as I discussed in the first video, is that you are progressing, that you are increasing the amount of volume or the amount of, total training that you're doing over time. And so, you get all these questions that are like, okay, is this amount of training too much? Well, I don't know. What was your previous level of training? Okay, is this amount of training too little? Well, I don't know. What was your previous amount of training? The reality is that what matters is not the work that you're doing. It's that the work that you're doing is increasing over time. And again, there's so many different ways that you can do that. You can add weight. You can add reps. You can add sets. You can, you're doing a bunch of sets and a bunch of reps and a bunch of weight, and you feel like you're hitting a bit of a wall. Okay, maybe you need to add some more accessory work, which is lighter, which is easier, which is going to allow you to squeeze out a little bit more results without seeing too much, fatigue holding you back. So the most basic sort of progression that you can do, one that I use a lot, is basically just some kind of linear progression, okay? So people have this typical, okay, you do 135, 3 sets of 10 for this week. Okay, next week you do 143 sets of 10, 145, 3 sets of 10 the following week. That is a basic linear progression that works sort of well for beginners. And the problem with that is that it sooner or later is going to hit a wall. We have this sort of, Milo and the bull story, which is an old Greek story where basically, Milo is a famous wrestler. He has a bull calf. He picks it up, he puts it on his shoulders, walks up and down the mountain. Okay, the next day he does the same thing. The calf is a little bit bigger. Keeps going day after day. Bull gets a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger. By the end, he is carrying a full-grown bull up and down the mountain every single day. And that sort of model is basically how linear periodization works. It's a very perfect analysis example for that. The problem is that it's not realistic because due to diminishing returns, due to repeated bouts effect, like I discussed in previous video, it's simply, sooner or later, your ability to adapt is going to slow down, and adding stuff linearly over time means that sooner or later, you're going to hit a wall where that line is progressing faster than you are. And so sooner or later, if Milo is a real person, he's going to try and carry the bull up the mountain, and one day it's just not going to work. And so the problem there is, okay, what do I do when I hit a wall? Because everyone's going to hit a wall in their training sooner or later. And this brings up essentially a very basic rule of thumb that I like to use a lot, which is essentially just, okay, what do I do when I hit a wall? You either do more or do less. And so the question to ask yourself here is, how am I feeling? Am I feeling good? Am I feeling recovered? Am I feeling, like everything was a little bit easy? Then the answer is that you need to be doing more. You need to be either adding volume or adding intensity or finding some way of making your program harder. If you find that you're feeling super beat up, everything feels like crap, you're just not seeing progress, you're trying the same thing over and over again for a few weeks and it's just not going anywhere, then you need to be doing less. You're basically overtaxing your body's ability to recover, and you need to be finding a way to, sort of step back, regroup, and continue forward again. So typically a pretty simple method is basically to use a deload. So, okay, you hit a wall. What you're going to do is, let's say, in the example before, you started off with a bench press 135 3 times 10. You get to the point where you can do 175 3 times 10, but then you're stuck there. You can't do 180 for 3 sets of 10 no matter how much you try. Well, at that point, you've got a few different options. You can deload, so you can basically say, okay, I'm going to drop back to 135 again. I'm going to build my way back up. And hopefully this time around, you've developed a little bit more in the process. You've had a bit more time to recover and to catch back up. And so, okay, this time you can do it a little bit easier. You can go up to, say, 185, 190, and then, okay, you've got to drop down and build back up again. Another method is basically just to find other ways to add volume. So if you find that you can't do 3 times 10 at, say, 170, do 165 for 4 sets. Add for 5 sets. A really simple method is basically, to sort of go, okay, what is, a challenging weight? Start off with 3 sets this week, and you don't even have to worry. You just make sure that the sets are near failure, challenging, not to complete failure. But they feel hard, they feel challenging. So that's 3 sets. Next week, 4 sets. The week after that, 5 sets. The week after that, you do a deload, add some weight, and repeat the process. It's pretty simple. It works really well for a very long time. That's sort of the basis of a lot of my training myself, and I've been seeing consistent results for years because I just take it slow, I'm patient, and I just sort of repeat the same process over and over again and adapt a little bit here and there as I need to. So to sort of go on to the topic of training volume, like I was sort of talking about before, so I discussed previously how training to failure is not necessary to see adequate results. When you're doing a set, what's needed is not to go to complete failure, but instead basically to near failure. So if you could only do 12 reps on say that your bench press 135, 3 sets, 12 reps is the maximum number of reps that you could get in that set if you really, really pushed it. But the reality is that if you train to something like 9, 10, or 11 reps, you're still going to see roughly similar results because it's still going to be challenging enough and it's not going to, totally trash you by basically just overtaxing your recovery. And so sort of the method that has become a lot more popular now is not to think about, these sort of archaic volume calculations, which is the traditional method, which is basically, 135 times 3 times 10 equals a total poundage. That's the total amount of weight that you lifted for your bench press in that session. So what you're going to do is you're going to calculate that, that number, and then next week you're going to aim for a slightly bigger number, and the week after that you're going to aim for a slightly bigger number, however you want to break it up. So you could break, again, you could do that by adding weight, adding sets, adding reps, whatever. And you want to focus on making small jumps, not big jumps, because big jumps are how you're going to hit that wall faster, and you're just not going to be able to recover, and you're going to have to step back and start things over again. And so that's sort of the traditional way of thinking about things, but volume calculations like that are not very accurate. Basically, they don't take into account a lot of factors, and they're always going to basically privilege certain rep ranges simply because they're always going to put up higher numbers on a calculation like that. Again, simply because, if you're doing like sets of 3 at 90% of your 1 rep max, you're going to create a very small volume calculation with that number simply because you're only doing 3 reps at a time, 2 or 3 reps at a time, versus something like 50%, maybe you could do 20 reps, and that's going to do many times the total volume simply because, you can do a lot more reps total overall. So the better way to think about it is, I am doing a set to near failure, and that is challenging, and that's going to, provoke roughly the same amount of stimulus in terms of building muscle as sort of any other set that I could do. And so that is going to be, sort of your marker, is the number of challenging sets that you do in a given week. So this is another one by Greg at Stronger by Science, New Approach to Training Volume. This kind of covers the topic pretty well, especially with these key points. Studies across a variety of populations have demonstrated that muscles grow in a very broad variety of rep ranges. When we match them for the number of sets, even with very different training volumes, they generally result in similar levels of muscle growth. Gains in strength and muscular endurance are still very much tied to the rep range used, as I was covering earlier in this video. At least when talking about size-based training, hypertrophy-based training, it is more useful to think of training volume as total hard number of sets per muscle than sets times reps times amount of weight used load. So what that means is that sort of the gold standard now for how do I measure my volume is the number of challenging sets that you are doing for a given exercise, for a given muscle group per week. So you might say, I'm doing 20 total sets, challenging sets for the bench press this week. So that might be, again, split across a few different training sessions. Let's say that you're doing 2 different training sessions, you're doing 5 sets of the bench press, and then you're doing 5 sets of some other chest exercise that is going to be counted along with that volume. Again, this is not a super precise measurement, but it's not intended to be a super precise measurement. It's designed to be a useful measurement. And so then what you can do is you can say, next week I'm trying to do 6 sets for the bench press, 6 sets for, this other exercise. So that's 12 sets per workout for a total of 24 sets. And so what you do is you're basically going to, over a period of time, add sets week to week for a little while, deload a bit, bring it back down a little bit, add some weight maybe, and then repeat the process over and over again. And what matters most is basically just that you're training, right? It's just that you're training for a long time. You're training with sets that feel challenging. Like, at the end of the day, that's what matters the most. There's so many different ways that you can break that down, and that's how you get all the programs that exist out there. All the programs that exist out there are basically just ways of trying to apply these basic rules that are a little bit different from something else that's on the market, that are maybe a little bit more useful for one trainee or another. But that's all they are. Every program in the world is basically reducible to this sort of understanding of things. There are a certain number of sets. Your sets are done in a certain intensity range so that you're getting the right, sort of adaptations that you want. You are using the lifts that you want to get better at, the muscle groups that you want to improve in size, and you're, resting as much as you need between sets. You're adding some variety in terms of sort of the way that you attack things, the exact, maybe using supersets or burnout sets or whatever to add a little bit of challenge and a little bit of excitement. But that's really it. That's really it at the end of the day. And that's the thing, is people have been conditioned to think that designing a program is this super complex, super hard thing, when the reality is that what you should be doing is just each week saying, okay, what can I do a little bit better next week? Continue to add things for about a month, step back a little bit, reduce a bit of volume, especially if you're hitting a wall, and then just repeat the process and build back up again. And then just repeat that for a few years. You're going to see results no matter what. And you're going to see that over time you're going to get stronger. The total amount of volume that you can complete is going to improve. And you're just going to, that's it. You're going to adapt, you're going to grow, boom. Just add in some protein to make sure that you're getting the most out of your training. Make sure that you're getting enough sleep so that you're maximizing your health and your recovery between training sessions. And you're done. You just repeat that for a long period of time. So, again, I think that people have been misinformed. I think that, again, people have been trained and conditioned to think of, programming in terms of all this complex stuff, when really it's just you make the numbers go up each week. You find smart ways to make the numbers go up in a way that is consistent, in a way that is not too sharp of an improvement, so that you can, make sure that your body is adapting in tune with the workload that you're giving it. And then you're just repeating that for a long period of time. You're just training for a long time, and, that's it. It really is that simple at the end of the day. It's just, a good coach is someone who has learned a lot of different ways to attack this same problem, and has become better at figuring out, okay, what are ways that we could break this down that are maybe a bit different? How can we attack this problem in a slightly different way? How can we make adjustments and changes here and there that are going to keep this ball rolling in the same direction, in that same, sort of basic pattern direction, without violating these basic principles that we have. So I hope that helps. I hope that people sort of get where I'm coming from here. I hope that you have enough information now to design a program for yourself that is going to work over the long span. There's so many more ways that you can complicate this. There's so many fancy terms. There's so many, there's just so much stuff out there to confuse you. But it is really quite simple at the end of the day if you just sort of apply these basic principles and, figure out, okay, when something isn't working out, what is it that I could, tweak? What is it that's possibly going wrong? Do I need to be doing more? Do I need to be doing less? Am I not training specific enough? Am I not getting enough recovery between sessions, and so on? That's really the way that you troubleshoot everything. You just figure out where the weak link is, you try to make changes there, and sooner or later you're going to see the results that you're looking for. So that really covers this week's video. Hopefully this is helpful for you. Let me know if there's anything that you're still not clear about in terms of, again, how to design a program for yourself. If there's anything that I've mentioned over the course of these videos that you just still don't understand and would like to hear more about, again, let me know. So I am going to go ahead and jump into the mail for this week. Alright, so just a couple of things this week. First one is on Twitter. I know this is not necessarily on brand for you, but will you consider making a video, even just a short one, on hair? I just started wondering, what if I am to grow my hair out? What if I want to grow my hair out and already I am finding articles recommending supplements, etc.? I honestly don't know. I cannot tell you. I've been growing my hair out for years now. I really just let it happen. I just use basic shampoo and conditioner, and it does okay. I brush it a lot. Yeah, that's really all there is to say. I guess I'm not an expert. I would be somewhat hesitant to think that supplements would mean much of anything. Like, there's, you know, the supplement industry is full of people just looking to sort of convince people to buy certain things, even though they don't really do much of anything. Particularly in the U.S., the supplement industry, it is regulated, but it's not really that well regulated. And so there are a lot of people who are just trying to make a quick buck, and they're just trying to convince people to buy crap that really won't do anything. There's been so many, historical examples of people who, they don't put in the supplement the ingredient that it's supposed to contain. There's plenty of examples of just, a company will run some shoddy research that gives some preliminary, possible evidence for a supplement, and then they quickly run off the presses and make a bunch of it and sell a bunch of it claiming it does that thing. And then, of course, more research comes out that shows that, of course, it didn't ever actually work. And so, okay, by that point, they've already made their money. They've already sold the supplements to people. Most supplements are, I'm not going to say a waste of time. They're just not going to be very effective, if at all. And, just in many cases, I wouldn't, again, I'm not read up on the research of hair supplementation. I just don't think it would be likely to mean very much, and I don't think it would be likely to do a ton. So this next one is a little bit funny. This is not actually a question that I got. This is just some spam that I got for an email. Hey, I hope you're the right person for this. My name is Blank. Run a blog called Blank, where we help dog parents speak with their fur babies. I'm emailing you because of a piece of yours, which I found here. I see you cover different uses and benefits of CBD. Therefore, I'm asking 33 seconds of your time. Just not. There's no. Yeah. There's no blog post where I talk about CBD. Here's the thing. Not only humans benefit from using CBD, it became quite popular that dog parents help their pets with their own CBD. That's great, but can also put dogs in danger. Seriously, not a joke. Not used properly, it can be highly toxic to our little pals. That's why Dr. Blank put together a comprehensive guide on CBD for dogs. Covers everything that dog parents must know to keep their babies safe and improve their lives. So I was wondering, can you help us educate dog parents by featuring a link to Dr. Blank's article in your piece? I think it would make a pretty valuable addition to your already fantastic piece, and your audience would really appreciate it. I'll let you be the judge, though, Blank. How does that sound? Thanks, Blank, Chief Editor Blank. P.S. The adorable fur baby in my Gmail profile picture is Speedy. You can read about her story at the About page on our website. Okay, so, for people who don't know what this is, basically, to give a very, very brief insight into what running a blog is like, you'll get tons of these, potentially several of these a day. And what happens is, in terms of SEO purposes, Google likes it when you have people linking to your site and when you link to other people's sites. Because basically that implies that you're, part of this ecosystem that generates more clicks to other people. And, that's a good thing because it implies, some level of sort of standards, right? And so there's plenty of these sort of people who are basically looking to try and get their writing into other sites, not really because it's a good fit for the site or because it really makes any sense, but just because they're just spamming everyone they can, and they're just hoping to get their links out there. They're just hoping to find those people who will be, oh yeah, you can post stuff on my blog, and, and that'll generate traffic back to your site or whatever. And it'll help with your SEO rankings. So, very often they're laughably maybe it's like someone who has maybe sort of some bare bones understanding of what your site is about. In many cases, it's clearly just, a random email sent out to every email address that they could find, and it's not at all relevant. So yeah, I'm sorry to announce that we will not be covering CBD for dogs on my website gains.af. I guess you're just gonna have to deal with it. All right, so that is the mailbag for this week. As always, don't hesitate to like, comment, subscribe. Helps out with the YouTube algorithm, helps other people see this video. Don't forget to comment, email me any questions that you have that you would like to see covered in future videos. Anything that you felt like was maybe not covered in this video. Feel free to make fun of me, whatever. Also, be sure to check out my Patreon, patreon.com/gains, if you would like to support this show and ensure that I can continue putting out good information about fitness and health that is free of all the BS that you normally find associated with fitness and health. So, that is it for this week, everybody. Have a good one, and I will see you next time.